All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Educators Forum, a forum intended to bring together educators from across the broader spectrum of the African continent. Our intent on this platform is to create a bridge, a connection, a platform around which educators far and near can converge, exchange ideas, network, and contribute to the discourse, the educational discourse. And so for our panel today, we have Dr. Matok Pama. He's the Vice President for Institutional Development. And if I get it wrong, please correct me. Institutional Development for the United Methodist University, that's in Liberia. He's also associated with some university here in the US, in Rhode Island specifically. We have a special guest from Nigeria, Ms. Idowu. The last name, you'll introduce yourself, but she serves on, she serves on the Lagos State Board of Education, the Lagos State Board of Education, and she's joining us all the way from Lagos, Nigeria. We also have Dr. Stevens, Dr. Augury Stevens. She's the Director of Training at Teach for Liberia.
Yes.
And I believe you're stationed in Monrovia.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. We have also Dr. Hughes, Allison Hughes, joining us from Accra, Ghana. He is a professor of physics at the University of Legon. Dr. Stevens, are you on?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. We'd love to. Not Dr. Stevens, Dr. Allison Hughes. Dr. Hughes.
Okay.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes, I'm here. Thanks. Good to join you. Hope you can hear me.
We hear you, but we can't see your face. These wonderful people would love to see you.
Oh, ready?
Oh,
All right. Can you see my?
there he is. There he is. Wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful. All right. So we have a full panel. West Africa is fully represented on this panel. We're really, really happy. We have two ladies joining us. Tejuade Idowu from Lagos and Dr. Stevens out of Monrovia. Hopefully in the next couple of panels, we're gonna have a full woman panel. You know, so don't be surprised. Don't be surprised when we call you back, okay?
Okay, okay.
So we're coming live. Those of you joining us by Facebook, please send in your questions by Facebook and they will be read. Anybody else joining us by Zoom, you can just send in your comments, but we want to give adequate time to the panelists to discuss the issues and the topic for which they have been called and they have so graciously accepted to participate. All right. So quickly, we are in very uncertain times. Conditions have changed. The sector of the educational landscape that by far is most affected is public education, because private service suppliers or providers normally do have the capacity over and beyond public school providers. Dr. Allison, Dr. Hughes, you're at the University of Legon. Tejuade, you work with the Lagos State Board. Dr. Stevens, somewhat semi-private sector. And Dr. Pangba, also in the private sector. How is the challenge for private school, not for private school, more from the public sector perspective? How is this challenge of public education? What strategies, and I like to delve in because the number of challenges is generally known. We don't want to stress too much the challenges. What we want to do is to leave this conversation with a few takeaways, actionable takeaways, all right? And so we want to focus more on what can be done, as again, what the problems are. We will highlight the problems, but more about taking away, All right. So our topic for the common good, how do we strengthen public education, especially in times of crisis as we have right now? And I like to start with Sidwadi. You're in Lagos, huge population,
Yeah,
lots of stress. What's your perspective?
yeah. Thank you for having me on this show. My name is Shiju Ade Idowu Tiamiyu. I sit on the board of the Universal Basic Education for Lagos State. When we had the pandemic here in Nigeria around February, and all our learning institutions shut down, the thought of how to keep student learning initially was quite intimidating. But at the same time, it was inspiring. And we started looking into what are the issues and what we can do differently. The first issues that confronted us was data. Some of our data were not in place as we should have expected them to be. However, we went back to the books and said, how do we continue to keep children learning amid of this pandemic, which is for us the most important thing, using the most vulnerable child as our benchmark. And we started by looking at what means of education delivery we can use here in Lagos State. We have over 20 million people residing here in Lagos State. And at the public primary education level, we have over 500,000 students. And in terms of data, we're still not where we're supposed to be. So looking at the most vulnerable child as our benchmark, we thought of two major things that exist in every home: the radio and the telephone. We felt these two things are key instruments to continue to keep children learning, using the most vulnerable child, again, as the benchmark. And we started an interactive radio program, which is aired on the most listened to radio. And for us, the challenge was not getting the child to listen. The challenge was getting the parent on board, because looking at it from the universal basic education angle, it was more of the target group was the child, children between ages 3 and 12. But again, it was these children are still within their still under control. I think I had tomato. So it was more of targeting the parent, the channels in which the parents are listening to, and airing and trying to connect the child through that. And that we put in place, bearing in mind the children with special needs. How do we carry them along in time of crisis? And again, I re-emphasize data. That because we don't have this data, we needed to think of other ways in which to carry children along to make sure that learning continues. And for us, the learning from here is that we've employed radio, we've deployed TV, we've reached out to public-private partners to please support us in these, and we've gotten overwhelming support. And if including response to all our programs, including on TV and on radio, has been overwhelming. We see that a lot of children are listening, and the feedback is quite exciting. However, we are deliberately making sure that whatever we're putting out there, we are also reaching out to the special needs. So making the education inclusive at the same time. So that we have been doing during the pandemic.
Dr. Hughes.
Thank you. Again, I'm Dr. Allison Hughes. I'm a lecturer at the University of Ghana, located at a place called Legon. And I teach physics and research mainly into air quality and renewable energy. As it relates to this crisis that we find ourselves in due to the pandemic, I think that the first speaker have outlined a number of the interventions that we had to deploy in the wake of this pandemic. Actually, immediately when the crisis hit Ghana, all schools were ordered to be closed. And then teachers and at the tertiary level lecturers were asked to try to keep our students engaged using various means of digital communication. At the tertiary level, we had just started the second semester of this 2019-2020 academic year. And so most lecturers had not been able to cover much of their materials. So initially it was a bit challenging because our lectures have been the traditional method of face-to-face. And now we were challenged in how to deploy quickly, you know, a digital method. At the University of Ghana, we have a learning management software, but not many of the senior members or the lecturers were rather trained in how to use this learning management software. So the university had to quickly mount training programs for members of the faculty and even both students and faculty in how to utilize this learning management software, which was going to be used to deliver lectures and also interact with students. As was pointed out by the first presenter, we also have a similar problem of the, lack of infrastructure when it comes to maybe digital infrastructure. Also, with the high cost of internet, it became a big problem. So university had to engage with the telecom providers to be able to give each student and also faculty some SIM card that they could use in their phone to enable access to this digital medium that was to be deployed. And so as it stands now, we still are engaging the students using various means, Zoom, using Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp, because we find that, you know, because of the lack of infrastructure, not many areas have even internet coverage. And since our students all had to leave campus, we are trying to find the best means possible to reach out to them. At the pre-tertiary level, the government had to quickly deploy tutorials and teaching facilities using the televisions, and now they are about to deploy using the radio broadcast. But you agree with me that this is still a big challenge because there are some areas that don't have the coverage of, these technologies. I remember incidents of one of my students who said that she could not access the internet unless she leaves and go about some few kilometers at a police station to access the notes that we have placed on the learning management portal. And so it's still a big challenge, even as we are about to move now into examinations. Universities have decided to give out take-home examinations to students. And if the students still have problem with any internet connection, they can take it to the nearby post office, and the universities will also be able to collect them. So all in all, it has been quite challenging, especially from a developing country that do not have strong digital infrastructure deployed. And so this is going to be a big challenge, but as the government have recently lifted the social distancing, especially in the area of education, the focus is now on getting the final year students to be able to write their exam, the promotional exams. And so in the next couple of weeks, we expect only the final years to return back to school and to be able to enforce all the various protocols necessary to prevent one getting infected by this virus. So we are yet to see how that will pan out, but we are hoping that the teachers, the parents, and all the stakeholders will be able to fully work to get our students be able to move on to the next level. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Dr. Stevens?
Yes, well, you know, one thing I don't feel so badly about now is because we all have challenges with the internet, and this COVID-19 caught the entire Africa, I would say, without, you know, adequate platforms for education, for what's next for our children. And so we all have the same challenges, and we all trying to figure out what, you know, what's the best way to go. I know that for the Ministry of Education, they implemented the same radio scenario as a colleague, my only female friend said. They instituted the radio program, teaching the children on the radio. When they think about, the only drawback to that is mostly within the city. You know, the other kids outside of the city don't have access to that. So that's a problem. And like we say, we don't want to dwell on problems, we're trying to dwell on solutions. So, yeah. But those are some of the challenges we have here. So, I mean, with all the different platforms, and then another thing is I went in, because I teach in the college, one of the colleges here as well. And same thing, the students didn't have any access to anything. They couldn't go to school, they couldn't, I mean, nothing. So I went and put my classes, I put my classes, 2 classes that I teach at the university, I put them together, and we went on WhatsApp. But going on WhatsApp was challenging again for them because they didn't have data. You know, you have to purchase the data to be able to access these things. So they were there, we did it for a week, and then it started falling off. Because no access to data, no resources money-wise. They in school, some of them, they haven't been to work. You know, too many challenges for this, and we're trying to put together some solutions. But one of the things that Teach for Liberia, we've instituted, because we're going to be having our summer institute. So what we've instituted, we putting together a digital platform that we have our new coming cohorts, about 75 of them will be coming on, and we'll give them data. We will supply the data. They're teachers, teacher trainers. So we will supply the data, and that will help them to be able to go to the Summer Institute. So I guess one of the things is if we can, you know, have maybe partnerships that will donate some data that will be able to help the situation for now, until we can actually put a system in place that everybody will have access to it. So I think that's one of the things that would help. But for now, it's really, really critical. Because most of the colleges, in fact, if not all, the students are not in school. They're not in school.
Dr. Pamai? Thank you, Dr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Whelan. I want to begin the conversation by looking at the core question: how do you strengthen public education in times of crisis? We can begin by looking, how do we define the new normal? In Africa, especially in developing countries, I personally believe we need to leapfrog into the 21st century. And to do so, there are a whole host of issues. If you look at the foundation of education with the one school or the one classroom, it has remained a cornerstone in how we go about our work, and the non-alignment into the core aspect of ensuring that the way in which we deliver our assessment and our instruction must come together in full alignment. For example, with the COVID-19, a colleague and I spoke about the issue regarding technology. But I'll go far back. Even if we had the technology, are the teachers prepared to use the technology to create a kind of impact that our students deserve? And for me, the answer is no. The different university ensuring that the teachers that we put out are adequately prepared to address the inadequacies along with the inequity, plus the issue to access. And one of the things I have found on that, for the several questions, the answer is no. So yes, I mean, if we must strengthen public education in terms of crisis, there has to be a new design that will ensure that the young people, the students are competitive across discipline and across the world. If you look at the situation of overcrowdedness across developing countries, how do you address that? Will social distancing be a factor to ensuring that the education become a different quality? Do government have the resources to modify classrooms? Do government have the resources to even build the ITC infrastructure that don't exist? A higher educational professional adequately prepared to the graduate students that can go into the job market and do the kind of work we need to do. So the idea of strengthening public education, we have to look at a contextual approach. If you look at the Western approach and you want to adopt it into the developing country model, I see massive failure, because our learning management system, in as much as they provide us a leeway into catching up, for example, at my own university, we have an online registration process, but we got less than 50% that are utilizing that process. We have students that's graduating from high school that have not even had the opportunity of benefiting from technology. You have colleagues of mine that are afraid of anything that look like computer, and they are the driver of education. So we have to come up with a hybrid. Should I call it a new normal as it being defined in the West? Do we say, okay, your new normal is good, but we have to look at our own African context and see how we can begin to look at the public-private partnership, including the development of government GSM companies, to support public, if I would say all public education. Because, for example, as the chairman of the board of education for the Methodist school system, the second largest in the country, besides my university job, we have few schools that could even afford to continue. We have majority of our schools, that have to basically close down, because if you look at the input into the school, the tuition students pay, and the cost associated with acquiring even the data card or the SIM card, school cannot afford that. So government, for example, Liberia, the government during the past time has not provided subsidies to all students. And the government is going to focus on public education, which is good. But all students, all parents pay taxes into a system that is unjustly providing some sort of benefits to public education. So public schools, tuition sometimes is exorbitant. even with the exorbitant price, this based on the cost of living, our folks cannot afford to pay that. So
let's move quickly to Dr. Fode. We got 1 hour so that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Dr. Fode.
Okay, let me say I'm sorry for coming on late. I had some issue with my computer. I had to borrow another computer to use. So it tells you the challenges we are faced with. But I think the topic is very important, very critical, and I want to actually thank Eden for the invitation and for initiating the discussion. I've been in Liberia now for 3 years when I left the US. And the challenge is enormous. But I want to go back to the question, because I know there are 4 questions I will be looking at. Why do we need public education? I want to go back a little bit, which would be like trying to belabor the obvious, because obviously we need public education. Because public education, is a right to the average citizen to an education that will prepare them for the future. So we really need public education. And as to how do we measure commitment to strengthening or supporting public education, there are a couple of things that we can look at, in my opinion. We look at, okay, it has to be demonstrated through action. And one of the measurement tool that we can use is a national budget, because government prioritizes its spending. So the spending government gave to education will actually, for me, will determine whether they are committed to supporting public education. Take for instance, I come from the University of Liberia. The current budget that we are dealing with, we have something closer to $16 million for the university. And given all the different challenges the university has or has to face, the question becomes, is the $16 billion sufficient? The Ministry of Education, the current budget, I think they're around 81 million, but in the 80 million. So government has to demonstrate, because when it comes to driving public education, government, in my opinion, is the key stakeholder. Yes, parents, NGO, we can establish government and private sector, partnership, but government takes the lead. So, and government has to demonstrate that through its national budget. So I know when I came on the speaker before, the current speaker, we're talking about suggesting the issue of mobile learning. And I work in other areas. Government has to commit itself to supporting mobile learning. It could be laptop, it could be the tablet. Because if you tell people to stay home, just for our current crisis, when students stay home, they need to be engaged. So one way, in my opinion, government can really demonstrate commitment is by supporting mobile learning and providing tablets, some means of, because our students that we have nowadays, they use technology than even some of us. So though yes, in terms of buying the technology may be a problem, but I think if you really introduce them to it, they will really take onto it. When I came back, one of the things I introduced Google Classroom. There were students who were saying, oh, I don't know it, I have never used this. But before the semester, and because I was always uploading my material, my lecture notes through Google Classroom, you saw that most of them became very interested in Google Classroom. We begin to use different platforms. So I would really think one way we can measure government commitment to public education is, what is their level of support when it comes to mobile learning? That's one way, in my opinion, we can measure it.
That's a great strategy, Dr. Fode. Now, so having had our initial comments from you all, let's look at how we could, as students, as parents, as administrators, as a government. And Dr. Fure basically stressed a lot on what government can do. The budgetary purpose is primary because government ultimately takes the lead and responsibility on the provision of education. But let's look at it from a parent standpoint, or from a student standpoint. How do we, what strategies can educators, can parents, can students invest in the process to move forward? Because regardless of which environment we're in, there's no one yardstick. There's no one strategy to address the different problems. When we compare Ghana against Liberia or Ghana against Nigeria, the contexts are all a little different. The context is a little different. And so perhaps sharing our different contextual strategies might help. And I hear Dr. Fure very well talk about mobile learning. That is a pretty unique strategy. How that materializes remains to be seen, but that's just from a conceptual standpoint, that's a great idea. Let's go back to Dr. Stevens. How can we address our commitment to public education from those different lenses under these times? And it may not just be the corona, it may be something else. Yeah, we have to now begin to plan for the unforeseen, you know, whether it's budgetary or just conceptual frameworks to drive us through whatever crisis we're faced with.
I think what we need to do, we need all hands on deck. We can't sit here and say because I am not a private school, so I'm not because I'm under a private school, I cannot interact with this school or this school. It has to be a collective effort. Because you see, in our setting here in Liberia, I've been here since 2013, coming back and forth into Liberia. And we also need a cooperation of the parents. We need everybody. We can, this is a town's cry right now for all hands on deck. So I guess when we can get to that place where we know the magnitude of education, how important it is, and it's for everybody to have a say in it. It's for everybody to bring what they can bring to the table. How can we help this? Because there's university doing their own thing, the other university doing their own thing, the other college, you know, it's like a piece of puzzles that nobody want to bring these puzzles together to fit. Because from my perspective, what I've seen in Liberia here is like every university wants to say they're the top. This other, it's like they're fighting. That's what my perspective. But I guess when we sit down and relax, I hope this pandemic will teach us a lesson because it's global, it's across the board. So I guess if we can come to the point where everybody, the government, yes, the government should take the lead. But we need to also help the government. You know, it's our children, you know, so we need to let the government, and the government itself need to be relaxed enough to say Dr. Fure has a lot of knowledge in this. You know, understand what I'm saying? So Dr. Fure can bring this to the table that will enhance education in Liberia. Dr. Papa, you know, everybody needs to come on deck. That's one of the strategies I know that will be able to help us move forward. We shouldn't be, I always tell my students, Liberia is not an island all by itself. This country is not an island. It's surrounded by a lot. Everybody else needs to come in. So one of the strategies is we just need to change our mindset about coming together and unifying to bring all of this together. You bring your skill, I bring my skill set, and we can go further. And also somebody touched on the private-public partnership. That's another good area. We need to bring all those things into focus. And I'm sure when we can finally relax and say, okay, we see the challenge, but we need everybody involved. we'll be able to go somewhere. And I like this panel discussion because I think it'll be an eye opener to people as well, that this is something that we need to speak about. You know, we need to speak about these things.
Dr. Hughes.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as we are aware, this is particularly a very difficult time, you know, for education. I mean, worldwide, we find that UNESCO have estimated that close to 60% of the population of the world students are currently out of schools. And when it relates to the developing country, we were already in the crisis even before this COVID-19.
Indeed.
I served as a panelist about 2 years ago at the National Education Summit held in Kakata in Liberia. And what we were trying to look at was just to look at STEM education in Liberia and TVET. And the challenges there were so, very, very, I mean, I don't know how to term it, because even having access to just simple lab equipments were so lacking from most of the schools. And so this is a similar situation that occur in, I mean, African countries, developing countries for that matter. And so I see that the solution to this, we have to look at it from a perspective of the short term, medium term, and also long term. And time did not allow us to go into details, but I think that in the short term, we need to continue to maintain, I mean, get our children and learners to continue to retain knowledge and skills by utilizing the television, the radio, and also WhatsApp and internet, because we know that if they stay home and they are idle, it's going to be a very difficult time bringing them back into the classrooms. And that is one thing we need to guide against, because the drop-off rate, I mean, is likely to be very high. We saw that when the Ebola crisis took place in Liberia. Many children who were in school are still now out of schools. So we must continue to engage them, and all stakeholders, parents must also take the role and see it as a means of continuing education. As it stands now, because teachers are sending notes, parents must be involved in the education of the children, trying to get them to do the homeworks and continue to be engaged. On the medium term, I mean, we still want to see how schools are going to gradually reopen, especially as the government access the data and the science concerning the impact of this coronavirus. And so as we try to reopen school in phases, I believe that we need to continue to, I mean, continue to get our students actively involved in learning and also using the digital means. I think, as we all know, we are in a digital age, and for that matter, Africa has been a bit lacking. And I think this crisis has exposed our educational system to show that we have not really invested in the digital infrastructure. And then on the long term, we have to continue to build capacities. One of the speakers mentioned about the teachers. Yes, so now teachers' professional development programs should be geared towards giving them training in using this digital technology. Government must also, another speaker talked about the public-private participation, must engage with the telecom companies and see whether there can be some, I mean, give them some tax relief so that they will be able to reduce the cost of data, because you cannot successfully implement digital technology if you don't have the access to the internet. And also, we also need to see more of this happening even at the tertiary level, because most of our universities also have that challenge. And I believe also that, government should invest in maybe setting up digital libraries, because students may have access to, internet, but they also need to be able to have access to libraries. And so if we cannot physically go into the libraries, we must be able to go into digital libraries. So to end, I would say that we need to invest heavily in digital infrastructure by using the public-private partnership. Thank you.
You know, let me, from our conversation yesterday, one of the emphasis point was on how to engage parents as key to bridging the gap between classroom instruction and kids that are hard to reach. What do you suggest is a viable way, a sustainable way of engaging parents in this quest to advance education, especially for hard to reach cases?
Yeah, and I see that there are diverse speakers here, and I would like to reiterate that I sit on the board of the Universal Basic Education, meaning that the group of children that I cater to are not, they are still within their parental supervision. And this is a very exciting conversation, because we're looking at how the pandemic came and it caught us unaware. And we realized that things have to change. Strategy to education delivery have to change. And we needed to start thinking about how do you reach a 4-year-old? In fact, even if they have the internet, learning online is alien to them because we haven't exposed them to that. It's not about having data, just about having data. So you have data, you have your laptop. Is that sufficient to learn? That doesn't necessarily be sufficient, because to these children, learning online, to majority of the children that we cater to, is alien. And most of them are used to learning with a teacher in front of them. And this is where the parent role comes in. And when we wanted to deploy the TV and the radio program, like I mentioned earlier, we thought about the most vulnerable child as the benchmark. And we start looking at which radio station goes beyond the metropolis of Lagos to the hard to reach end, which is most listened to. And we spent 2 weeks running a research. And eventually we came to a conclusion of a radio station to use. A radio station that's a very local one, not the fancy one that me and you listen to, a very local one that speaks to the very, very hard to reach child. Because that has a decent reach. And we also looked at the TV station that does not necessarily, that has both cable and terrestrial presence. And in doing that, we also worked with the school-based management committee. Who are the school-based management committee? They are like a bridge between the school and the community. We worked through them to promote lots of sensitization to make sure that these kids are learning. We reiterated to them that this is not a holiday. So there's pandemic, you've been asked to stay at home. You've been asked to stay at home to curb the spread of pandemic, not because you're on holiday. And because, and we know that in getting these children to learn, the parent has to be involved. So in doing that one, we targeted the parent means of sourcing information, most of them radio. They listen to news every morning, and after the news, our program starts immediately. So they get the child on board. 2, we use the TV that is not mainly on cable. We use a TV that has both cable and terrestrial presence. That is not to say we're not using the internet at all. All our recordings, all our content provided for education purposes are on YouTube, Facebook. We have recordings posted on Twitter. So we know that some children can leverage on technology to learn. However, looking at the poverty line and the people at the very bottom of the pyramid, a lot of them will rely on radio, and in most times even the mobile phone. We'll be using the mobile phone of the parents to get feedback. from those children to see how is the child learning, what has the child learned. In fact, we get feedback as much as some parents taking pictures and sending to us. And we realize that beyond having data and a tab in your hands, there is need for guidance. And we've been reaching out to the parent through the school-based management committee, which is already in place. They are community members interested in public education, and we've been using them to drive our sensitization program beyond the jingles that we're doing on radio. And also, we've also factored in the timing of our program. Apart from the news, we now, after the opening, easing off of the pandemic, a lot of parents need to go back to work. And we thought, come, they are going to be at work. Who is going to support the 4-year-old? Who is going to support the 6-year-old to learn? You know how kids can be. So who is going to make sure that they are listening at the time at which we're airing? So we needed to move the time to about 4 p.m. so that the parent, wherever they are, would have been back from work and will be able to support the children. And now this is looking at it from the parental lens. Also from the teacher aspect of things. Like she said, some of our teachers, like I said, there are two different ages that we have now. We have the people in their 40s, in their 50s, who are not so very conversant with technology. And you have the young, groovy one, like me and you, who can, okay, yeah, Zoom here and there. And so some of our teachers are not where we want them to be in terms of being a digital citizen, being able to use technology to drive learning. And since we noticed that, very quickly we reached out to Microsoft. Microsoft is now coming on board to teach teachers, to train teachers on how to use Microsoft Teams to deploy learning and how to get feedback from their students. So like she said, all hands has to be on deck. We have to target learning from different angles. However, most importantly, we have to look at our context and provide solution based on our contextual need. We know we are all in Africa. We know what the budget of education is. We know what our government is investing. We know it's not sufficient. For us in Nigeria, we are hovering around 7% to 7.5% of the total education budget. Meanwhile, according to UNESCO, it's supposed to be around 15 to 20%. So it shows the level of funding we're getting. But again, I say to myself all the time, no amount of funding is sufficient for education. It depends, what matters is how far do you want to go? So government alone cannot do it. Like she said, all hands has to be on deck. The parents have to come on board. The teachers have to come on board. Public-private sectors have to come on board for us to get learning going, especially during this time of pandemic. All hands have to be on deck. And we've been getting results. Like we've been having Microsoft come and say, see, we can help you. We've been having non-governmental organizations say, we've been listening to your program and you guys are doing a lot of work. Can we further fund this? We want this to go beyond the 13 weeks. Can we sponsor you? Can we do more? How can we support you? In the area of special needs, we have people deploy interpreters to us to say for the audiovisual, for the TV shows, they need interpreters so that the people with hearing impairment are able to come on board and learn at the same time. So far so good. This is what we have been doing, reaching parents, connecting teachers at the same time, and also making sure that we're gathering support, not just from the public sector, but from also the private sector guys.
Dr. Kukula, let me ask this question from a sociological standpoint. How is this situation informing your engagement, say in the classroom or even with administration, in terms of positioning the University of Liberia to becoming more of a producer of knowledge, not just a disseminator of knowledge, but a producer of knowledge, which has its basis in research? How, if any, are there efforts in that direction in helping policymakers to see the things they need to see from a sociological standpoint?
Well, I want to make some previous comment on previous remarks that were made, but to address a question specifically, one of the things we can do is community engagement. Our community needs to be engaged, and I really mean that. I mean all stakeholders. In our context in Liberia, to be more specific, the way people perceive the role of the government, the role of the teacher, the role of students, even the parents, may not be as the way you perceive in a Western world. So we have different layers in the community. You could come, I'll take for instance my own community, you may have community organizations, because some of our parents may not be literate, they may not be involved in a PTA, they may not attend PTA meeting. So the question is, how do we engage them to be very active in the PTA? Because some of the messages could be passed through the PTA. So strengthening the PTA could also help to disseminate the information, because if we don't prioritize community engagement, and like the previous speaker said, it's not, we can't leave that all to the government. We definitely fail, because I was reading the Education for All report, and you know, one thing that really struck my eye was that most of the countries where you have high rate of dropout are countries where you have conflict. It could be armed conflict. Now be compounded by the health crisis, where people are being asked to stay home. How do you, while people stay home, how do you engage them to still be involved with education? That will require making sure that you have community organizations, those who are advocating for education, to be involved, to enlighten our people. And one other project that have been, I really want to say what, one laptop per child, you know, or a PC. And I was reading the project that's working in other countries, in sub-Saharan Africa. The cost of the laptop is being dropped because government stepped in to make it lower, so that people can be able to afford the cost of the laptop. But at the same time, we also have to make sure that parents also have to take responsibility, because we can, public education should be free, but we also have to, because through the engagement, people will have to know that education is not just free. To some extent, they contribute to the education of their children or their child. And that means that it means that you have to pay some little amount towards what it will take for your child to be at home and learning. They will have to do that. But the way you do that is to engage them. You can't leave them out. So PTA need to be strengthened. Community organizations advocating for education need to be strengthened, need to be engaged. So really, from the sociological point, community engagement, we also have to do some survey, because sometimes we may assume that this is what our people want, but you have to conduct research to see what is it that people really want. Because I know in Liberia we have the different drama, and people give different messages in different dialects, different vernaculars. Like the current coronavirus, if you see people on the radio or in the car, passing around educating the community, coronavirus real. So can we adapt something that really best fit our reality in Liberia or in other African countries? I think those are things we need to be looking at. So we need to think outside of the box, whatever that can work. I think we need to do that.
Well, one of the advent of the corona had prompted this process that we're currently engaged, bringing educators together to finding a common solution, but just sharing experiences with which we can borrow in our enclave and contextualize, all right, to address some of the challenges that we have in our respective educational environment. We have 6 more minutes, which isn't long at all. The conversation just started, so I want to respect the time of our panelists and the time of the over 176 people who joined us by Facebook today. To give you all, say, 30 seconds to a minute each to just summarize your perspective on strengthening public sector education, especially in times of crisis. So we'll start with Dr. Stevens and then on to Dr. Hughes, Wade, and then to Dr. Mator, and finally to Dr. Ford.
Thank you. Well, one thing we've done at Teach for Liberia, I like the Teach for Liberia's platform because we take a group of cohorts that we actually train. And when we train them, they're teachers and they're bachelor's degree holders. When we've trained them, we send them into the community. And they partner with teachers at the local level. So what they've learned, how to do lesson plans, how to strengthen the children, how to teach, these are one of the things we do. So when we send the teachers out, they are fully equipped to be able to train and help the local teacher. So and then that brings in the community, the parents, but the parents get involved because the teachers are out there, they're supportive of parents, they're supportive of the students, they're supportive of the administration in the schools. So this is one of the things that we do. And what we're trying to do right now, Desmond Diggs, who's the founder, we're part of Teach for All. So we're part of a group of network. And what we're doing now, all the teachers will have pamphlets, you know, the digital teaching mechanism they're gonna have. So we train them on using it. So we do a lot of training and a lot of teaching. And so this will help strengthen the community again because you're doing it at the grassroots. We don't go to private schools, we go to the community setting. And like our previous speaker said, it's the community. So we have to bring in the community. And this is what one of the things, so the challenges are there, but at the end of the day, we see a ray of sunshine as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. And anyway, in my final remarks, I'll come to you. Dr. Hughes.
Yeah, I think to just conclude on this, we need to have a paradigm shift in the way we see education. Yes, the COVID have taught us that we need all stakeholders on board because being locked up and home with the kids, now parents are seeing the challenge that teachers also go through with all the homeworks, it's quite a lot. I have to sit in Zoom meeting with my kids. I have to make sure because they want to do the homework and you have to give them access to the medium by which the schools are using. And then also, I think it behooves government to really try to continue, dialoguing with all stakeholders to see how best we can come up with the right approach. We need to look at our curriculum again. All right, our curriculum was based mainly on just this face-to-face education. COVID is teaching us that we may have crisis again and we may not be able to have access to students as we usually do. How do we go from here? And as I said earlier, we have to invest heavily in technology.
Education.
And I believe that the government has the capacity to do this. So invest heavily in education, especially digital education, infrastructure. And I think that as we do this, there are children who even know, how to handle these digital devices even more than the parents. So they are now even teaching the parents how to use these devices.
Yeah.
So it is just a matter of access. And as the other panelists said, make it available, and then you will see that our children will prove that they are up to the technology age that we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Williams. I was begin with the public-private partnership. I think that's the core. And I think one thing government can do to accelerate the new normal or the new learning is government needs to invest in a common platform, a common learning management platform that allow institutions, or just like a cloud, cloud system that people can go there and store their data, and for all students to have access. Individual schools wouldn't have that capacity to have that common learning management system. Furthermore, the whole issue of parent teacher, I want to remind us that it has to be contextualized. I mean, I work in inner city America, public high school as a principal. I had about 67 to 69 different languages. And even at that point, I had struggled getting parents to parent-teacher meeting that were required by my district. The issue of having a single parent is profound in Africa, in our own context. So even students doing homework and taking homework to school. So if you look at the opportunities that COVID brought to us, is that we have to look at learning in a communal setting, that the responsibility must be shared, but to begin this process, government leadership is needed, and we are going to have a hybrid learning. As to whether we had a traditional classroom, I think that we have passed that point. Schools now, for example, my own university, we are already brought in our own private provider, Matana. We are looking at how we can begin some sort of remote learning, because that's the future. And in schools and university, as well as a K-12 or tertiary higher education, must be competitive. Then the whole idea has to change. In fact, I spoke to a colleague today about ACAT or SAT. Now you have WATS, the West African Examination stuff. I mean, the state know rudimentary stuff. In fact, the government library already lifted extended time to 9 p.m. with the whole idea that students must go and sit into a class, to take WATS. When you have SAT folks, doing automated examination. So I'm not even sure the government is even prepared to address the challenges they see along with the opportunities that do exist. That, hey, you know what, you can educate not just so many students, you educate your entire country if you think out of the box, and if you have a way in which the gifted students that, if I would call virtual high schools, that do exist, virtual universities that do exist. So the whole mindset, the whole paradigm of thinking must shift, and have to shift very fast for African countries and most important developing countries.
Eduardo? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. Like the last speaker said, I think we, by ourselves, we've kind of carved an artificial structure around ourselves in Africa. And learning for us has always had to be drive the student into the classroom and get the teacher there to teach. But now COVID has taught us that those are just artificial structures.
Indeed.
The student need to be in the classroom to learn.
Yeah.
And like the speaker said, we need a uniform platform, a virtual uniform platform, like the cloud, where learning can happen without the children necessarily being in the classroom. And if we are quick to set this up, there is the possibility of another pandemic hitting in the next 5-10 years. We will not have to run to radio station, TV station, drag the parents and all that. And it will start by imbibing this now,
Need something
making
sustainable.
sure we have this platform and getting the kids to be used to this platform, using this platform for as little as assignments, sending assignments on this platform, having them all go there, and getting them used to this. Because for most of them, virtual learning still seem very alien. But if we have this for both tertiary, secondary, and basic education, I think there is no matter the pandemic, no matter the issues we face, learning will continue and will not be structure bound. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Dr. Piccolo, you put in your final.
Yeah, I'll go back to my opening comment. I think the national government in all African countries need to look at the national budget on education I just want to think that the spending on education need to be reconsidered with emphasis on mobile learning. Because moving forward, given the experience of COVID-19, government needs to reconsider its budget, need to look at the Ministry of Education curriculum in terms of, do we have mobile education or emphasis on mobile education? So just in case of any crisis, what do we have allocated for mobile education? The government will come up with a national policy. If you say, yeah, government will spend this amount, and let it be there. So because, like, I give you an example, I have my two daughters in the US, one in the 5th grade and the other one in the 6th grade. And now they've been home for more than 2 months. But they're learning on the tablet. So most of the time, because I have my email address, though I'm in Liberia, but I'm always participating. Because every time the teacher will have, if they don't submit an assignment, the teacher will send an email and I get a copy that your daughter did not submit assignment 1. Then I will immediately email the mother and say, the girl did not submit assignment, what's happening? So do that. So government need to come up with a policy on that. That's one. Another one government need to do is to ensure that the Ministry of Education is emphasizing competent-based education. Because at the end of the day, government wants to prepare students who will contribute to the onward development of the country. So we have to emphasize skills enhancement, skill development, so that the students who will come from there will be prepared for the workforce. In the case of Liberia, most students who enter the university want to do political science. And the government come up with solutions that students will come up and get some skills that they will be able to contribute to the development of companies, instead of everyone going in political science and coming up, going on radio, just talking. So government need to look at how we can reprioritize spending on education, but with emphasis on mobile learning.
Thank you, our panelists. We've gone like 7 minutes over time because the conversation was deep. But we can't thank you enough for showing up and showing out, sharing with the rest of the continent. Again, this platform is intended to bring educators, regardless of our stations and our location. It's to bring us all together, network, exchange ideas. This hopefully will run at least one Saturday every month. We've run it now for the last 3 weeks. So this is our 3rd event. There's the next one coming. So don't be surprised when we call back on you, but we ask you to go deep into your networks. Share the links we sent you. Let's bring as many as we can on board so that we move this process forward. We, as a result of the COVID, we cannot continue to rely on external help to develop our societies. We have to be the ones driving that change. We have the might, we have the means, we have the intellect to drive it. And so let's drive it through our conversations. Let's drive it through our actions. All right. So on that note, I'd like to thank all of you, everyone, for coming. Thank you so much to our 176 Facebook followers. We are so enlightened, elated by your commitment to being with us this long, over an hour. We thank you so much. Please join us next week. We will send out the flyers and we'll continue to reach out to as many of you as possible. Thank you, Dr. Hughes, for showing up. Our gratitude to the Republic of Ghana. Enjoy yourself. Situate Lagos, Nigeria, we say thank you so much. Those of you from Monrovia, Dr. Stevens, Dr. Plumbai, and Dr. Stevens, thank you so much. We couldn't be more grateful. All right?
Thank
you. One and all have a pleasant weekend.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
so much.
Okay.
All right.
We'll see you again.
All right.
Nice to meet everybody.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
George, are we getting the recordings?
Yes, I will. I will distribute the recordings. I will.